Who watches the watchers is very much a question that's still being answered, like we saw with 9/11, like we've seen with overreaches of American privacy laws, as we've seen with the overreach of social media, right? Like watching the watchers is becoming a very real challenge, especially because technology is advancing faster than policy. It's advancing faster than human thought. It's advancing faster than social norms. And technology is giving us capabilities that 10 years ago we didn't think we'd ever have. Do you remember Charlie's Angels?
Yeah.
Charlie would port in
I had a poster of them on my bed, over my bed.
Sorry, I can see why. I can see why. But he would port in on a TV screen in their car, and there'd be a video call.
Mm-hmm.
That was 1970 something, and we were like, "That's never going to happen." Yeah. Now, that happens all the time. You can have 4 video calls simultaneously, right? 1 from your phone, 1 from your tablet, 2 from your different computers in different windows on the same operating system. Remember when you could only have 1 window open at a time?
Yeah.
So technology moves so fast, society has a hard time keeping up with it. So the question of who watches the watchers boils down to really 2 things. 1, trusting the branches of government. We have a legislative branch, a judicial branch, an executive branch. Your intelligence services fall, for the most part, under the executive branch. The checks and balance to the executive branch still come from the legislative branch and the judicial branch. Your intelligence community is operating at the behest of the president, but funded by the legislative branch. So if the House doesn't agree with what's happening, they can simply cut off funding to the IC. The judicial branch is who holds us accountable. We can go to jail. What people don't realize, every intelligence officer, when they reach full performance, which is a point in their career where they're deemed to be a full performance officer, meaning they can do all the various operational acts required of them in their role, the first thing they have to do is get professional liability insurance, because they can be sued by any member of the public, by any member of the foreign entity, right? They are individually culpable under the judicial branch. So who watches the watchers is largely the checks and balances of the state. But then you have what you were highlighting, compartmentalization, which is also known as need to know. And there are many, many operations where need to know does not extend to the judicial or the legislative branch as a whole. It only extends to a few minority people in those whose job it is to provide oversight. And oftentimes those individuals can be corrupted to the cause, right? If you have 2 or 3 judges and 2 or 3 senators who are all right in on the same operation, but everyone agrees that the biggest threat in the world is North Korea, you're going to see everybody kind of loosen up the rules a little bit to operate against North Korea. That's just human nature. So that is a problem that we're finding in that watching of the watchers.
So yeah, it reminds me a lot of this guy over here. This is Galileo, showing for those listening out there, my famous finger puppet. I'm known for my finger puppets. And here's Galileo with his telescope. But of course, back in 1632, when he came out with his second or 5th book or whatever, it was called The Dialogue on Two World Systems, which was meant to explicate the notion of a heliocentric universe versus the Earth-centered or geocentric universe that had prevailed for 2,000 years. And this was found to be in great contrast to what the Catholic Church was willing to accept. And they were the equivalent of the U.S. government on steroids. They were the most powerful entity on Earth at the time, and still of great power, as you know. And so it was partially their duty to, make sure that certain things were censored in order to keep the peace and keep. We look at it now as Galileo was this hero of science, and he is my hero, and he's he's the first scientist in many ways. Invented the telescope, perfected the telescope. We'll talk about that in a bit. But the fact is, they needed to maintain secrecy in certain things, and so they actually allowed him to study the heliocentric model of the solar system, where the sun was at the center. But they said, you just can't teach it. So do us that solid. Don't teach it, because that would raise eyes of the public and start to maybe undermine their power. And so he said he agreed to that. And actually later on, 20 years went by, and he thought, I'm famous enough. I got the ego and the swagger. He could do whatever he wants. And by that time, he said, actually, what teaching meant was you couldn't teach it in the natural vernacular of the people, which is Italian. But the original research was done in Latin. So his first book is called Sidereus Nuncius, which means starry messenger. And people were fine with that. Even though it promulgated the notion that the earth wasn't the center of the cosmos, as the Bible allegedly, according to some, maintained. So there are a lot of parallels there. And only when he published in Latin and Italian did he really get subject of the Inquisition. So it's really almost his fault in a certain way. And, that he didn't abide by those rules.
fresh on you.
Freedom!